The people who never look at a child are often the ones watching the closest. I didn't understand what that meant until the night Vincent Moretti walked past my son without even slowing down. At the time, I thought he was just another cold billionaire who had forgotten what ordinary people looked like. Looking back now, I realize that was the first move in a game only he knew he was playing. My name is Emily Carter, and 3 years after my husband died in a construction accident, my entire world fit inside a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn and the small hand of my 6-year-old son, Noah. Every morning began before sunrise. Coffee brewed while I packed lunches, answered emails from my first job, and prayed my 20-year-old sedan would survive another commute. Life wasn't glamorous, but Noah somehow made every difficult day feel lighter. He believed every broken toy could be repaired, every rainy afternoon could become an adventure, and every stranger deserved a smile. I wished the world deserved his kindness. That Saturday afternoon, the Children's Literacy Foundation hosted a fundraiser in Midtown. My employer had donated books, and volunteers were invited to bring their families. Noah had spent the entire week talking about the puppet show and free ice cream. I almost stayed home because my second job had ended after midnight, but seeing the excitement in his blue eyes made the decision for me. The ballroom looked like something from another universe. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors while waiters carried silver trays through crowds dressed in tailored suits and elegant gowns. I felt invisible among them, wearing the nicest dress I owned, one I had bought on clearance 2 years earlier. Noah, however, walked in like he owned the place. He waved at everyone. He complimented a florist arranging white lilies near the entrance. He even stopped to help an elderly volunteer pick up a stack of children's books that had slipped from her arms. That's when the room quietly changed. Conversation softened. Security agents near the entrance straightened almost in perfect unison. I turned toward the grand staircase and saw him descending with measured confidence, as though the building itself had been designed around his footsteps. Vincent Moretti. The newspapers called him a business magnate. Financial magazines praised his investments. Rumors whispered another story entirely, one built on influence, loyalty, and power that never needed to introduce itself. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, an understated watch that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and an expression so calm it was impossible to guess what he was thinking. People greeted him with practiced smiles, yet every smile carried just enough caution to reveal genuine respect. Noah noticed him too. "Mom," he whispered, tugging my sleeve. "That man looks lonely." Children saw things adults ignored. Before I could answer, Noah took 2 small steps forward, holding the extra chocolate chip cookie he had saved from the refreshment table. "Excuse me, mister," he called with innocent confidence. Vincent slowed for exactly 1 heartbeat. His dark eyes met Noah's face. There was no smile. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Then he continued walking as though my little boy had never spoken at all. Noah lowered his hand, still holding the cookie. My heart tightened. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders and forced a smile I didn't feel. "It's okay, sweetheart. Some people are just busy." But as Vincent disappeared into the crowd surrounded by impeccably dressed associates, I missed something that every camera in the ballroom quietly captured. Without turning around, he lifted 2 fingers almost imperceptibly, and somewhere beyond the glittering lights, someone immediately began watching everyone who came within 10 feet of my son. I told myself I would never see Vincent Moretti again after that fundraiser, but life has a strange way of placing the same person in your path when you least expect it. Monday morning arrived with its usual rush of traffic, spilled coffee, and unanswered emails. I dropped Noah off at Lincoln Elementary just before the first bell. He hugged me tightly, adjusted the oversized backpack that always seemed a little too big for his small shoulders, and ran toward the entrance with the same excitement he carried every single day. I watched until he disappeared through the front doors before driving across town to the marketing office where I spent my mornings organizing campaigns for companies whose products I could rarely afford myself. Around noon, my phone vibrated. Every parent knows that feeling. Your heart skips before your mind catches up. The school secretary explained that Noah had forgotten his asthma inhaler after gym class. He was perfectly fine, she assured me, but they preferred to keep a spare in the nurse's office. I apologized, thanked her, and promised to bring another one after work. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings, deadlines, and constant guilt that I could not be in two places at once. By the time I reached the school, the parking lot was nearly empty. Noah came running toward me with his backpack bouncing behind him. "Mom, guess what?" he asked, climbing into the car. "The crossing guard got a brand new jacket today." I smiled. "That is wonderful, sweetheart." And Mrs. Peterson said somebody donated new books to our library. The shelves are full now. I glanced at the school entrance where volunteers were carrying fresh boxes inside. That was unusual. The school budget had been struggling for months. "That is amazing," I said. Noah nodded enthusiastically. "Everybody has been really nice today." Children notice kindness before they notice anything else. Over the next 2 weeks, little things kept happening. The broken swing at the neighborhood playground that had been waiting for repairs all summer was suddenly replaced. The flickering streetlight outside our apartment building worked again after months of complaints. The elderly crossing guard who always looked exhausted now had an assistant during busy mornings. Even Noah's teacher mentioned that anonymous donors had covered supplies for students whose families needed help. None of it seemed connected until one rainy Thursday evening. Noah and I stopped at our favorite diner after grocery shopping because he had earned perfect spelling scores all month. As we waited for grilled cheese sandwiches, Noah looked through the rain-covered window and suddenly waved. "Mom, it is the serious man." I turned instinctively. Across the street, a black sedan waited beside the curb. Vincent Moretti stepped out wearing a dark overcoat, speaking quietly with two men in business suits. The moment lasted only seconds before he disappeared into a nearby office building. He never looked toward the diner. He never acknowledged us. Yet something about the timing unsettled me. The waitress placed our food on the table with a warm smile. "Your meal has already been paid for," she said. I frowned. There must be some mistake. She checked the receipt. No mistake. A gentleman took care of it before he left. I hurried outside, but the sedan was already gone, its taillights fading into the evening traffic. I stood there in the drizzle wondering why one of the wealthiest and most mysterious men in New York would pay for 2 ordinary dinners without saying a single word. What I did not know was that less than half a mile away, Vincent sat silently in the back seat of his car while a tablet rested on his lap. One photograph after another appeared on the screen. Noah helping a classmate tie his shoe. Noah sharing crayons with another student. Noah thanking the cafeteria worker. Vincent studied every image without changing expression before quietly asking only one question. "Has anyone failed the test yet?" The question haunted me far more than I wanted to admit. "Has anyone failed the test yet?" I did not know those words existed, of course, but somehow I could feel that something invisible was unfolding around us. The comfortable rhythm of our ordinary life had become strangely polished. Problems disappeared before they could grow. People seemed unusually attentive to Noah. Even the apartment superintendent, who normally needed 3 reminders to fix anything, replaced our leaking kitchen faucet less than 24 hours after I submitted a maintenance request. It felt less like good luck and more like someone quietly rearranging the world around us. I tried convincing myself I was imagining it until the following Saturday. Noah and I spent every Saturday morning at Prospect Park. We packed peanut butter sandwiches, brought an old soccer ball, and pretended the wide green field belonged only to us. While Noah chased pigeons with endless determination, I sat on a weathered bench answering work emails on my phone. That was when I noticed the familiar black sedan parked across the street. It was impossible to miss because I had seen it twice before. The same polished finish. The same discreet driver waiting behind the wheel. A few moments later, Vincent Moretti stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and a navy jacket that looked expensive without trying to impress anyone. He was alone this time. No visible security. No crowd surrounding him. He crossed the sidewalk toward a nearby coffee stand without even glancing in our direction. I watched him order a black coffee, exchange a few quiet words with the vendor, and continue walking through the park as though he had every right to blend into an ordinary Saturday morning. Noah noticed him almost immediately. "That serious man is here again," he whispered. Before I could stop him, he waved enthusiastically. Vincent kept walking. No wave. No smile. Not even the smallest acknowledgement. My cheeks warmed with embarrassment for Noah. "Forget him," I said gently, pulling my son closer. "Some adults are too busy thinking about themselves." Noah looked disappointed for only a second before returning to his soccer ball, but I could not let it go. 20 minutes later, as Noah climbed the playground structure with several other children, I heard footsteps behind me. "Ms. Carter." His voice was calm, deep, almost impossible to read. I turned so quickly that my coffee nearly spilled. Vincent stood a few feet away with both hands in his coat pockets. Up close, he looked even more composed than he had at the fundraiser, every detail controlled without appearing rehearsed. "You seem to appear wherever my son is," I said before I could reconsider. His expression remained unchanged. New York is a small city when you notice the same faces. Do not play games with me. I lowered my voice, careful not to alarm Noah. "If this is about charity, thank you for the dinner, but I do not need favors. And I certainly do not need someone following my child." For the first time, his eye shifted toward Noah, who was laughing as another little boy helped him retrieve the soccer ball. The corner of Vincent's mouth almost softened before returning to complete composure. "Your son is kind," he said quietly. "The world is not always kind in return." I folded my arms. "That is not your concern." His gaze returned to mine, steady enough that I felt he was measuring every word before speaking. "It becomes my concern when people mistake innocence for safety." I took one step closer. "Stay away from him." He held my stare without the slightest irritation. "If you believe every smiling face around your son deserves your trust, then you are asking the wrong question." My heartbeat quickened. What question should I be asking? Vincent glanced briefly toward the playground before answering. "You should be asking who benefits from getting close to him." Then he simply walked away, disappearing down the tree-lined path with the same quiet confidence he always carried. I stood frozen, trying to convince myself he was just an arrogant man who enjoyed speaking in riddles. But across the playground, I noticed a woman I had never seen before smiling warmly as she introduced herself to several parents while watching the children a little too carefully, and for reasons I could not explain, I suddenly remembered every word Vincent had just said. After that conversation in the park, I promised myself I would stop thinking about Vincent Moretti. I had spent enough energy trying to understand a man who acted like every sentence carried a hidden meaning. My life did not have room for mysteries. It had room for grocery lists, overdue utility bills, school projects, and making sure Noah never felt the weight I carried every day. Yet the strange feeling refused to disappear. It settled quietly into the background of ordinary life, becoming impossible to ignore. 3 days later, Noah came home unusually excited. "Mom, guess what happened today?" I smiled while unpacking groceries onto the kitchen counter. "Tell me everything." "Mrs. Collins says we are getting a new reading corner with bin bags and hundreds of books. Somebody donated everything." I paused for a moment. Lincoln Elementary had spent months asking families to contribute used books because the budget had been cut again. Now an anonymous donor had transformed the library almost overnight. "That is wonderful," I said, although the timing felt strangely familiar. Noah continued talking between bites of macaroni and cheese. "And the substitute teacher who yelled all the time is gone." "Gone?" I asked. "Mrs. Collins said she accepted another job." Noah shrugged as children always do before moving on to the next exciting subject. I wished it were that simple for adults. The following Friday, another unexpected change appeared. The elderly security guard who greeted every student each morning had retired unexpectedly. In his place stood a younger man with kind eyes who somehow already knew every child's name by the second day. Noah liked him immediately. "Mr. Harris always waits until I get inside before he closes the gate," Noah told me proudly. "He says every kid deserves somebody making sure they get to class safely." Those words stayed with me all afternoon. It sounded exactly like something Vincent would say, although I had no reason to believe they were connected. That evening I stopped by the neighborhood pharmacy after work. While waiting in line, I overheard two women talking near the greeting cards. "Did you hear about that daycare on Maple Street?" one asked quietly. "Apparently they failed another inspection." "Already," the other replied. "They had such a good reputation." "Not anymore. Parents started pulling their children out yesterday." I barely paid attention until I remembered the smiling woman from the playground. Noah had mentioned she worked at that very daycare. Suddenly the memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. She had introduced herself to parents far too eagerly while asking unusually personal questions about family schedules, after-school routines, and who usually picked up each child. At the time, I had dismissed it as friendly conversation. Now I was not so sure. Later that night, I tucked Noah into bed after reading 2 chapters of Charlotte's Web. He hugged his stuffed dinosaur and looked up at me with sleepy blue eyes. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think the serious man does not like me?" My heart ached. "Why would you ask that?" "Because every time he sees me, he acts like I am invisible." I brushed his blonde hair away from his forehead. "Some people have a hard time showing what they feel. That does not always mean they do not care." The word surprised even me. I was defending someone I barely trusted. After Noah fell asleep, I stood by the living room window watching rain slide down the glass. Across the street, a delivery van stopped outside our apartment building. A man stepped out carrying a package addressed to one of our neighbors before driving away a minute later. Nothing unusual, except another dark sedan waited half a block behind it with its headlights off. It remained there only long enough to watch the van leave before quietly pulling away into the night. The next morning, I found an envelope tucked beneath my apartment door. There was no stamp. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the smiling woman from the playground talking to a man outside the daycare, and written neatly across the bottom in black ink were 7 words that instantly made my pulse quicken. "Be careful who earns your trust first." I stared at the photograph until sunrise, turning it over again and again as though another answer might appear on the blank white back. There was no signature, no explanation, only those 7 words that refused to leave my mind. Be careful who earns your trust first. I wanted to throw it away and convince myself it was nothing more than a cruel prank. Instead, I slipped it into my desk drawer before waking Noah for school. He smiled through breakfast, completely unaware that my thoughts were somewhere else. I envied that innocence more than I could ever explain. The next few days passed quietly on the surface, but underneath, I found myself watching people more carefully than I ever had before. I noticed who asked unnecessary questions. Who lingered a little too long. Who seemed unusually interested in Noah's routine. It was exhausting, and I hated what it was doing to me. Then, almost without realizing it, I began to understand why Vincent always looked as though he trusted nothing except what he could verify himself. While I struggled with uncertainty, another story was unfolding far beyond anything I could see. Vincent stood inside the top-floor office of Moretti Financial Group, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Anyone walking into the room would have believed they were meeting one of the country's most successful investors. They would have seen polished wood, modern artwork, and city views worth millions of dollars. What they would not have seen was the quiet discipline behind every decision he made. A gray-haired advisor placed a thin folder on the conference table. "Everything has been reviewed," the older man said calmly. Vincent opened the file without speaking. Inside were photographs, timelines, employment histories, volunteer records, and background reports covering every adult who had become part of Noah's life during the past month. Teachers, coaches, building employees, childcare workers, even neighbors who regularly greeted him in the hallway. Vincent turned each page with the same expressionless focus. "Mrs. Collins," he asked. "Excellent record. 22 years teaching. Multiple references. Another page. Mr. Harris? Former Marine. Youth mentor. Background confirmed." Vincent nodded once before reaching the final photograph. The smiling woman from the playground. His eyes remained fixed on the page several seconds longer than before. She introduced herself to 6 different families in one afternoon, his advisor said quietly. None of the conversations involved her own child. Vincent closed the folder. Remove her from the environment without creating fear. It is already done. Silence settled over the office. Finally, the older man looked toward Vincent with something almost resembling concern. "You have spent weeks protecting one little boy who has no connection to your business. Why?" Vincent walked toward the window, watching traffic move like tiny streams of light below. For several moments he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I had never imagined. "My younger brother was 7 when everyone around us believed he was safe." His reflection remained steady against the glass. The people who smiled the most were the ones nobody questioned. The advisor lowered his eyes respectfully. Vincent continued quietly. By the time the truth revealed itself, trust had already done the damage that fear never could. He rested one hand against the cool window overlooking the city he controlled with quiet influence. "I promised myself there would never be another child standing alone because the adults around him failed to notice what was happening." His phone vibrated softly on the desk behind him. One of his security coordinators had sent a brief update. "Emily Carter continues to refuse assistance. Noah Carter continues to show kindness to everyone. No immediate concerns." Vincent read the message only once before locking the screen. A faint smile almost appeared before disappearing again. "The boy has not changed," he said softly. "Good." Then his expression became serious once more. "Keep watching the adults. Children rarely hide who they are. Grown people do it every day." The following Tuesday began like every other ordinary day, which should have been my first warning. The most dangerous moments in life rarely announce themselves with flashing lights. They hide inside routines that feel completely familiar. Noah finished his cereal, reminded me that Friday was library day, and carefully tucked his favorite dinosaur bookmark into his backpack. I kissed the top of his head before we walked toward the school together through the cool October air. The maple trees lining the sidewalk had turned brilliant shades of orange and gold, and for a few precious minutes, life felt beautifully normal again. Halfway to the school entrance, a silver pickup truck stopped beside the curb. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a smiling man in his late 30s wearing a baseball cap and a maintenance company jacket. "Excuse me," he called politely. "Does this road lead to Riverside Avenue?" Before I could answer, Noah stepped closer with the fearless helpfulness only children possess. "Yes, sir. You keep going and turn left at the big church." The man thanked him warmly and drove away. It lasted less than 20 seconds. I would have forgotten the conversation entirely if another vehicle had not quietly pulled around the corner almost immediately afterward. The familiar black sedan slowed for only a moment before continuing through the intersection. I never saw who sat inside because the windows were too dark, but somehow I knew. That afternoon my office phone rang just before lunch. The principal from Lincoln Elementary sounded apologetic. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted you to know we have updated our afternoon dismissal procedures. Every authorized pickup person will now need photo identification before a child leaves campus." I blinked in surprise. "That seems sudden." "It is simply an additional safety measure," she replied kindly. "Several schools across the district are adopting the same policy." After hanging up, I could not stop thinking about it. Another coincidence. Another unexpected layer of protection appearing out of nowhere. By the end of the workday, I was no longer certain I believed in coincidences. When I arrived at school, Noah came running toward me with his usual bright smile. "Mom, Mr. Harris taught us a new safety game today." "A game?" "If somebody I do not know ever says you sent them, I have to ask for our family password first." I frowned gently. Family password? Everybody picked one today. Ours can be pancakes because you always make pancakes on Saturdays. I laughed despite myself. That sounds perfect. As we walked toward the parking lot, I noticed a man standing beside the entrance watching families leave. He wore a dark business coat instead of a school uniform, and he seemed more interested in observing the adults than the children. The moment his eyes briefly met mine, he nodded politely before walking away without speaking to anyone. Something about him reminded me of Vincent's quiet associates. Calm. Alert. Never wasting movement. Later that evening, while Noah finished his homework at the kitchen table, someone knocked softly on my apartment door. I opened it expecting a neighbor. Instead, I found a neatly wrapped package resting on the welcome mat. There was no delivery driver in sight. Inside the box sat a brand new children's bicycle helmet, exactly Noah's size, along with a small handwritten card. There was no signature. Only one sentence written in careful block letters. "The safest path is the one prepared before danger appears." I felt equal parts grateful and unsettled. Whoever kept sending these silent gifts knew more about our lives than they should. Across Manhattan, Vincent Moretti listened quietly as one of his advisors finished a brief report. The unidentified man in the pickup truck has been confirmed. He approached for different elementary schools asking similar questions. Vincent's expression did not change. Did he ever reach the boy? Only for a few seconds. Vincent closed the report without another glance. That was long enough. He stood and looked out across the city lights once more. "Tomorrow," he said calmly, "we stop watching from a distance. The real test is about to begin." The next morning, I almost convinced myself that the fear had been living only inside my imagination. The sun was bright, the sky was perfectly clear, and Noah spent the entire drive to school telling me about the science project his class would begin after lunch. He wanted to build a model bridge from popsicle sticks because, according to him, strong things were supposed to help people cross difficult places. I smiled, wondering how someone so young could accidentally sound so wise. Before I drove away, I reminded him about our new family password. He grinned. "Pancakes. I remember." Then he disappeared through the front doors with the same carefree confidence that had always made me both proud and terrified. Around 3 that afternoon, my phone rang while I was reviewing a client presentation. Seeing the school's number instantly tightened my chest. "Mrs. Carter," the secretary said calmly, "there is no emergency, but could you please come a little earlier today? We had a small misunderstanding involving an unauthorized pickup attempt, and we would like to speak with you." The drive to Lincoln Elementary felt longer than it ever had before. When I arrived, Principal Dawson welcomed me into her office with a reassuring smile. Noah sat in the corner, coloring dinosaurs as though nothing unusual had happened. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The principal folded her hands on her desk. "A man arrived shortly after dismissal and claimed you had asked him to pick up Noah because you were delayed at work." My stomach dropped. "I never asked anyone." "We know." She smiled gently toward Noah. "Your son asked him for the family password." Noah looked up proudly. "He said he forgot it." "And what did you do?" I asked. "I told Mr. Harris." The principal nodded. Exactly what he was taught to do. She explained that the man apologized politely, claimed he must have confused the children, and left before anyone could ask further questions. There had been no argument, no panic, just a conversation that ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Yet my hands would not stop trembling. Someone had known Noah's name. Someone had known where he went to school. Someone had expected a 6-year-old boy to trust a smiling stranger. As Noah and I walked toward the parking lot, he slipped his small hand into mine. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside him immediately. "No, sweetheart. You did everything exactly right." His shoulders relaxed, but mine refused to. Halfway home, another memory struck me like lightning. The man in the silver pickup truck. The directions. The friendly smile. Had he been asking for directions at all? Or had he simply wanted Noah to feel comfortable talking to unfamiliar adults? That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, there was another knock at my apartment door. This time Vincent Moetti stood outside himself. No bodyguards. No expensive overcoat. Just the same calm expression that somehow made everything around him feel quieter. I folded my arms before he could speak. "Was this your doing?" I demanded. "Did you arrange what happened today?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "No." His voice was steady. "But I knew someone would try." Anger rose faster than fear. "You knew?" "Yes." "Then why did you not warn me?" For the first time since I had met him, something almost painful crossed his face. Because the safest lesson is the one a child survives. Before someone with worse intentions teaches it. I stared at him in disbelief. "That is not your decision to make." He accepted every word without defending himself. "You are right." Silence settled between us. Then he reached inside his jacket and handed me a thin folder. "Read this after Noah is asleep tomorrow night." I looked down at the sealed envelope without opening it. "What is it?" His eyes met mine, completely unguarded for the first time. "Proof that someone you already trust has been telling strangers exactly where your son will be." I did not open the folder until the following night. Noah had finally fallen asleep after insisting that we read one extra chapter because heroes never quit before the ending. His bedroom door remained slightly open, just the way he liked it, allowing the hallway light to spill softly across the floor. I carried the sealed envelope to the kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea that quickly turned cold, and slowly unfolded the papers inside. The first page contained a timeline. School pickup schedules. Volunteer events. Weekend soccer practice. The library fundraiser. Every location where Noah had been during the past month had been listed with remarkable accuracy. My breathing slowed as I turned to the second page. There were copies of text messages. Names had been removed, but the conversations were impossible to misunderstand. Someone had been sharing information about my daily routine with another person. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obviously dangerous. Just enough details for someone else to know where we would be and when. The final page contained a photograph that nearly slipped from my hands. It showed Melissa, another single mother I had become friends with during Noah's soccer season. We had shared coffee after games. She had watched Noah once when I worked late. She knew my schedule better than almost anyone outside my family. The image captured her speaking with the same man who had approached the school pretending to pick up Noah. There was no sign of fear on her face. They looked as though they were having an ordinary conversation. I closed my eyes, refusing to believe what I was seeing. The next morning I called Melissa and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed immediately. As we sat together in our favorite neighborhood cafe, she smiled exactly as she always had. She asked about Noah. She complimented my sweater. She laughed about how quickly children seem to grow. Then I quietly placed the photograph on the table between us. The color disappeared from her face. She stared at the picture for several long seconds before whispering, "This is not what it looks like." I wanted to believe her more than anything. "Then tell me what it is." Tears gathered in her eyes. He told me he worked for a family foundation that wanted to sponsor children who needed educational support. He asked simple questions. Which schools had the best reading programs? What sports the children enjoyed? Which families might appreciate scholarships? She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. I thought I was helping. I searched her face, looking for dishonesty, but all I found was overwhelming regret. She had not betrayed us because she wished us harm. She had trusted the wrong person. Suddenly Vincent's words echoed through my mind. Children rarely hide who they are. Grown people do it every day. Later that afternoon, I asked Vincent to meet me in the same park where we had argued weeks earlier. He arrived precisely on time, carrying nothing except the quiet confidence that never seemed to leave him. I held the folder tightly against my chest. "You were right," I admitted softly. She did not even realize what she was doing. Vincent looked toward the playground where Noah laughed with several classmates. Most people do not. We stood together in silence until I finally asked the question that had haunted me from the beginning. "Were you testing Noah?" Vincent turned toward me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not cold. It was tired. Almost sad. "Never." His answer came without hesitation. "I have never questioned the boy's heart." I frowned. "Then who were you testing?" His eyes moved slowly across the adults surrounding the playground. Parents talking to one another. Volunteers organizing games. Teachers greeting students. Everyone who wanted access to him. He took a slow breath before continuing. "Kind children do not need to earn protection, Emily. They deserve it before anyone asks for proof." At that exact moment, Noah looked across the playground, spotted Vincent, and smiled with complete trust, and for the very first time since all of this began, Vincent smiled back. The weeks that followed did not return my life to what it had been before. They gave me something better. They gave me clarity. I stopped believing that safety came from luck, and I stopped assuming every warm smile deserved immediate trust. Most importantly, I realized that real protection rarely announces itself. Sometimes it simply stands nearby, saying nothing, making certain you arrive home without ever knowing how many problems never reached your door. Winter settled over New York, covering the city in bright mornings and cold evenings. Noah loved every minute of it. He built crooked snowmen in the small park outside our apartment, insisted that every cup of hot chocolate needed extra marshmallows, and continued greeting strangers with the same gentle heart that had first caught Vincent's attention. I worried that everything we had experienced might make him fearful of the world. Instead, it taught him something far healthier. He became careful without becoming suspicious, kind without becoming naive. One Saturday afternoon, our neighborhood hosted a holiday festival. Children decorated cookies while local musicians played familiar Christmas songs beneath strings of white lights. I was helping Noah hang handmade ornaments on a community tree when I noticed Vincent standing near the edge of the square, speaking quietly with Mr. Harris from the school. There were no expensive cars surrounding him this time. No obvious security. He looked less like one of the most powerful men in the city and more like someone finally allowing himself to breathe. Noah spotted him almost instantly. Without hesitation, he ran across the plaza holding a small paper ornament shaped like a star. I started to call him back, but Vincent was already kneeling so they could speak at eye level. "I made this," Noah said proudly, offering the ornament with both hands. "It is not perfect." Vincent accepted it as though it were the most valuable gift he had ever received. "The best things rarely are." Noah studied him with the serious expression only children can wear. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent nodded once. "Why did you always pretend you did not see me?" The question hung quietly between them. Vincent looked at the little paper star before answering. "Because I needed to make sure the people around you were paying attention, even when I was not." Noah thought about that for several seconds. "Were they?" Vincent glanced toward me. "Most of them were." Noah smiled with complete satisfaction, then reached out and wrapped his small arms around Vincent's neck in a simple, spontaneous hug. For a moment, the man who had built his life on discipline, caution, and absolute control forgot every wall he had ever constructed. He returned the hug gently, closing his eyes for only a second before standing again. When Noah ran back toward the cookie table, Vincent walked over to me. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence between us no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt earned. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Not for the gifts. Not for the anonymous help. For believing my son was worth protecting before anyone asked you to." Vincent watched Noah laughing with the other children beneath the glowing lights. "Every child is." I smiled for the first time without hesitation. "You know, he does not think you are the serious man anymore." One corner of Vincent's mouth lifted into a genuine smile. "What does he call me now?" I looked toward Noah, who had just turned around and waved enthusiastically. "His quiet friend." Vincent placed the paper star carefully inside his coat pocket as though it belonged there forever. Looking back now, people often ask me when everything changed between us. They expect me to name a dramatic moment, a grand confession, or a life-changing decision. But the truth is much simpler. Everything changed the day I realized that the strongest people are not the ones who make the most noise. They are the ones who quietly protect hope until it is strong enough to stand on its own.